Welcome to Influences Cafe. Today on the show, David Dungan. How's it going today, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty chill. Just enjoying the warmth here and heat in Vienna, and I'll be going into swim soon in the river.
Sounds good.
So we met on LinkedIn, and I think it's through one of our mutual friends that we kind of got to know each other. Probably Earl Gibson III.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I had a look at your profile on LinkedIn, and you quite a lot of things you do that are quite interesting to me. I've had a little bit of military experience being in the Air Cadets, so I'm quite interested to know about the gun stuff that you do in armory and what that involves, and also I think you do work with the Forestery in Indiana, I believe, as well.
Right. So I'm an Indiana conservation officer, which what a lot of people call a game warden. So we are responsible primarily in our little niche that we carve out. We work with the natural laws. So we will enforce hunting and fishing laws, as well as in Indiana, we're fully empowered police officers. So we do everything else that the other police officers do, but we also do hunting and fishing regulations, environmental crimes, things of that nature. So it's a little bit of everything. It runs the gamut.
So how many officers per miles for the Forestry?
So right. So Indiana, we have 92 counties in Indiana, and we have, if we're at full staff, we have 214 officers. Because of budget cuts in the current climate, we're down to about 175 officers. So that's 175 officers, including all of our staff, to cover all 92 counties. So probably an officer every 400 square miles.
So, like, I was watching a video on Indiana and their forestry, and they've done a lot of good work since the start of the last century, it seems, in growing the forestry back to, support wildlife and the community. So, how do people access? Like, it looks like they're only removing certain types of trees, like older trees. So, if there's not roads to every part of the forest, how do they extract this wood without doing a blanket, like cut down whole swathes of forestry?
Yeah, they'll go in and they'll carve a small path, but a lot of times in a lot of the parts of the country are called a two-track path, so it's wide enough for a logging truck to get in, and then they'll just cut a small path with the least amount of damage they can do to the forest to get back to the section they need to primarily in Indiana for fire prevention, or for massive forest fire prevention, to keep the amount of fuel to a minimum if we can.
Yeah.
So if heaven forbid it does catch fire, it doesn't become like we see in California, where you're not allowed to pick up brush even off your own property, and there's a lot of old dead dry stuff laying around. So once it catches, it's a lot of fuel, a lot of readily available fuel, and it burns very quickly. That's why part of the problem California has with their wildfires. It looks really pretty to leave all that stuff lay there all the time. It looks really natural, but the backside to that is when it does catch fire and you have residences inside of that area, it creates a big problem. So it's the balance between keeping people safe and keeping nature as close to what we want it to look like and be as possible. So it's a delicate balance.
In the eastern part of Athens, Attiki, there was over 100 people died in a Greek wildfire 2018. You guys had a lot about that. Basically what was happening was that people were growing, because it's beautiful, right? People growing all these extra trees, and when Greece gets hot, it stays hot for a long time. And this tinderbox place, some of the videos are insane. With just like one guy just escaped with the skin of his teeth. The fire missed his house, and you see these like 870 mile/an-hour winds with a fire outside his home. It's insane.
Right. Yeah. Well, the fires create their own wind, and that's part of what drives them. So in Indiana, and a lot of places in our forests, we have it looks like power lines going through, but it just happens to be a nice place to also make a fire break. So they'll cut a lane that's several tens of yards wide, or maybe wider, and that way that's supposed to be the theoretical distance that the fire won't be able to jump across if a strong wind comes along.
Yeah.
So it hopes to keep it contained in a small sector rather than getting out of control.
Yeah. So do you have to know a lot about botany to do that kind of job?
Thankfully, no. I was trained as a biologist, but I'm not real good with plants. My thing is more animals, mammalian type stuff. So my degree is in animals and such. I'm not much of a green thumb. I leave that to my wife. She's the green thumb. She tells me all about what I need to know about plants.
Yeah. So how do you split up your time between forestry work and say urban work?
So the way our division works, the way our department works, inside of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, there are 19 divisions. So we have a forestry division, we have a water division, we have a historic preservation division, we have obviously a finance division and such and so forth. And my division is the law enforcement division. So our job is to make sure that we enforce the rules and the laws that all the other divisions promulgate to make sure that they have what they need to keep the natural resource safe. So while we need to know a lot, and the conservation officers are the face of the DNR, and we need to be able to know a lot of things just being game wardens, we spend a lot of our time proactively looking for violations that are ongoing. Let's say someone is in a state nature preserve and they're digging ginseng illegally, or they're cutting down trees they shouldn't be cutting down, or picking endangered plants. We're actually looking for those things going on at the time that they're happening, so then we can enforce those and take care of that. On the urban side, a lot of our waterways, like you have in Europe, run right through major cities, and there's a lot of what we call urban forestry, which I find a funny term, but urban forestry with large groups of trees and things, and parks that also need attention. So they just kind of blend together. In a normal day, you just kind of weave around and you talk to a lot of people, and most interactions, like all police interactions, are consensual and happy, and everybody, we discuss things, all kinds of topics, and we go on our way. And then once in a great while, you get that one person that decides that they're not going to follow the rules, that they're special and going to do it their way, and then we have to take action with those folks. But it's really, as I tell everybody when they start this profession, when I was training young guys, 99% of the time it's really kind of boring. Other than if you like talking to people, it's not boring. But the actual being a police officer in Indiana, in the United States, is pretty quiet most of the time. It's not Hollywood. It's definitely not Hollywood. Hollywood has definitely hurt our profession very badly, from the standpoint of everybody thinks you go out and shoot 20 people, and then you talk to your captain and you go back to work the next day. It doesn't work like that. So, I've spent 24 years on the job and I've never shot anybody. So thank goodness, and I don't want to. But it just doesn't happen. And if it does happen, as we see in the news, then those folks are automatically going on administrative leave, and there's going to be all kinds of investigations. And it's really a nightmare. Yeah. But it's not Hollywood where, every day is a gunfight. I couldn't live like that. I'd be eating Tums like they were going out of style. Yeah. So it's not the reality of it. But that's what people think the reality of it is. So.
Yeah, I was only in Indiana for passing through, but I was up in Kokomo for a while. Nice town, lovely people. I think there was a little bit of a drug problem there.
Yeah. We in Indiana right now, we've been having our issues with heroin. It came through and did its number, and we're starting to see. I think we're getting that under control. But now methamphetamine's made a bit of a comeback. So it's just in places like Kokomo and the city pretty close to me. I live fairly close to Kokomo, only an hour away. And like Muncie, over east of where I'm at, there's just a lot of the industry, the auto manufacturing industry, moved out, and so there's a lot of people that were jobless, and they just it's that cycle. We see it over and over again. So poverty, and there's nothing else to do, so they end up getting hooked up on drugs, and unfortunately, that's a big part of our job.
You think it's a lot to do with outsourcing to the east, cause a lot of the jobs to leave?
Right. So a lot of our jobs here locally, so in the area I live in, I actually went to Mexico to the General Motors plants in Mexico. So that was, the town just south of me, that's the major landmark where I live. I'm told, I've never lived here when that happened, but I was told at the height it was right around 150,000 people about 35 years ago. And now it's down to about maybe less than 50,000. So that's a huge contraction. And you're talking about a lot of people that grew up thinking that they were just like their father and their grandfather, they were going to go to work in the factory, work their 20, 30, 40 years, retire, and then do something else. And then approximately a generation and a half ago or so, all those jobs moved away. So those
I
folks
don't know
had
anyone
nothing.
my age that has a mindset like that.
Yeah, yeah. It just went away. That was the bad part. It just up and vanished on them. So.
So what's the most like exciting thing that's happened on the forestry trail? We had to like correct someone's dodgy fishing activities or picking ginseng plants.
Those are pretty boring unless you run across somebody that's maybe wanted for something,
Yeah.
has an active warrant. Those do happen occasionally. We respond because we work in fairly rural locations. We respond a lot to accidents, um, vehicular accidents. So we see a lot of stuff there. We're responsible for all the drownings that occur in the state of Indiana and reporting of those. We have a very active dive team. Our guys go out and unfortunately recover a lot of folks that have drowned. So yeah, just anything and everything you can imagine. And then of course, because we're fairly rural, the county I live in is very large, and we only have maybe four to five sheriff's deputies on it at night, and it's a fairly rural county. So a lot of times we help pick up that slack as well. And the reciprocation there is if we get into something that we need help with, then they're available to help us. So it's a one team mentality. Doesn't matter what color the uniform is, we're all on the same team. So in that case, you respond to domestic violence cases, drug overdoses, all kinds of stuff that just everyday police work.
So I've noticed it seems like you also do you like do on the beat stuff, or do you do a lot more management? I can see you're doing some like grant administrator, budget, finance, logistics, fleet management, instructor, defensive tactics.
Yeah. So when I came off the road after 16, almost 17 years of doing road work or police or beat work, um, my kids were getting older. I wanted to spend more time at home. I was looking for something different. I'm kind of not hyperactive, but I don't like to do the same thing over and over. I could never work in a factory, let's say, because I don't have that mentality.
Sounds like me, man.
So yeah, so I wanted to try something new, and there was a job opened up at the headquarters, and I've always been mathematically inclined and had abilities in those areas, so I went into that, and actually flourished pretty well until, like I say, 2 years ago when they asked me to take on a new role. So I thought, yeah, that sounds like something new I've never done before. I think I'll try that as well. So I moved on. But yes,
So
I was the fleet administrator. Go ahead.
yeah. So what's you used to be a fleet administrator. Does that mean looking after the cars?
Yeah, well, mostly purchasing them, making sure that they're put together properly, and then as guys crash them or they become destroyed or they just age out, then putting new vehicles into the fleet to keep them as fresh as possible. So what's interesting, and I think a lot of people miss, and you and I spoke briefly, but people, they're burning all these police cars in these cities, in these riots. That's a lot of money. And what the folks that are burning them, I hope have come to realize is that that's taxpayer money. So you're really just burning your own property at that point. It just doesn't make sense. And those police cars, even though they look like regular cars, they're not. They have a lot of extra equipment in them, and underneath, while the engine and the drivetrain is pretty well the same, a lot of the electronics have been reworked in those cars. So, you just can't go buy a car off the lot and then take it out the next day and put it on the street as a police car. It just doesn't work that way. And so you're talking extra tens of thousands of dollars to outfit these cars to make them ready for street use, and then they're going and burning them up. It's just, you're going to be out. All the lighting, the computers, all the extra electronic equipment, all the stuff that's in those things is very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, as a technical person, I watch those videos and like 20 cars get burned. I'm thinking to myself, those cars must be about £100,000 each after all the expenses. So you've basically burnt 20 million, £2 million.
Yeah, I think it depends on what they do to them. Like we drive pickup trucks because we work rurally and we need that sort of thing. So our base pickup truck from Ford is about $25,000 when you get the government rate. And then you add in about $12,000 worth of equipment just to even get it on the road. And then you've got to pay someone. You need somebody professional so the truck doesn't catch on fire because you short something out. So you send them to what we call an upfitter, and those folks have to put all that in there and then make the truck actually run correctly. So our trucks are probably just equipment alone before you put the computer and everything else in them. We're right about $35,000 US, just so they can even be driven down the road. and then we put out some other stuff in them. So, but luckily for us, because of the way our guys work, our light packages and some of the stuff we have in our vehicles isn't as extreme as, say, you would find in like New York City, because we don't need that. We need it to be more protected. So, but yeah, they're expensive. Every time for us to buy 20 vehicles, I know is about $750,000 is what we're going to budget just to get them on the road.
Yeah.
That's expensive. So this is when you're burning them up by the dozens in the streets.
It's insane, man. Sheesh.
Yeah. Well, the upside of that, if you're from years of doing this, the upside is if hopefully if they're destroying the property, then they're not hurting people. That's the only upside to it. In our profession, as much as you hate it, equipment is a tool. Our first and only real priority is human safety. So, it's just not.
But by burning these cars, they are hurting people eventually, whether it's through lack of medical care or lack of quality of living. Economics is a cost for everybody.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. So all those that defund that they want to do to the, let's say that defund doesn't mean get rid of them, it just means cut their funding. Well, you just cut your social spending that you want to do on the other side if that was your goal, because those cars are still going to need to be replaced. So yes, ultimately the only person you're hurting is the people that you are saying that you're trying to help, because like most cities and states don't carry insurance. They're self-insured, let's say. It's not worth the price of having an insurance company in there, so they pay it as they go, essentially. It makes a lot of sense to do that, but these are the things that the rioters are not paying attention to. They're looking for headlines. They don't really care that it's going to cost down the road.
Yeah, and it's not like you can just print money to fix this thing, because any government can print money, but you're destroying a physical asset that's taken actual human physical activity, and that can't be replaced. It can be replaced with more activity, but yeah.
What's disturbing is, so you set that, let's use police cars. You set that police car on fire. Who maybe 3 or 4 blocks away has a choking baby or a grandparent that's having a medical issue we can't always wait for the ambulance to come all the way from the hospital, pick the person up and take them back. There's many times that we put people in our vehicles and take them directly because time is of the essence. And you've just taken that potentially life-saving piece of equipment out of service just because you wanted to make make a point. That's what always disturbs me, is what did it cost outside of the physical cost and the physical damage, but what services did you cut to people that you're trying to help, or you're supposed to be trying to help later?
The only people that are going to benefit from this are the people that make the police cars, right? Because they're going to be getting more money unless they have a special deal that says they'll replace the car if they're destroyed by riots. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
No, and I think that the Ford probably makes enough cars that our impact isn't substantial. But you're right. I mean, it does make money for somebody, just not the people that I think they're people trying to say they're trying to help.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the armory work, if you're allowed to talk about that. I mean, that's pretty sensitive.
Yeah. So being a police officer, our department and working rurally and dealing with hunters and fishermen, we deal with armed subjects all the time. That doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong or anything, but when you're out hunting, obviously you're going to have a weapon of some sort. So we have matching type weapons. Our department issues a sidearm, and then they issue us a rifle and a shotgun. And I've always been my dad grew up. I always tell people it's like any other tool. You need the right tool. You don't take a sledgehammer to put a nail in the wall. And you don't take a finishing hammer out, or you don't take a tack hammer out to build a barn. You need what you need for the situation. So they all have their purposes, and that's a much deeper discussion because, to me, a pistol is a defensive weapon, and it's kind of like a last resort. That's what happens when everything goes south, and you have to make sure that you're going to protect yourself and everyone else. Last ditch is a handgun because they're short-ranged, relatively inaccurate, even though you can train very well with them. They're not the greatest tool in the world if you need to reach out somewhere. So we have all those different weapons, and I grew up weapons platforms, and my dad's a gunsmith since the time I was very little. So I grew up working on firearms. I really enjoy firearms immensely. So it was just natural for me to slide into that job where I would maintain our firearms and work on our firearms. So I just, they asked if anybody wanted to be an armorer, and I said, yeah, that sounds like a good job. I'll take that one. So it's just a part-time gig that you do for the guys when they, in the course of work, they break a gun, or practicing, something goes wrong, you know how to fix it and get it right back in service.
Mm-hmm. So M16, is that like normal gun that law enforcement have for the forestry?
Well, it's a pretty common. It's the military version of the AR-15.
Right.
And ours were obtained many years ago. I don't even think that the type that we have are really commonly manufactured anymore. But it was just a situation where those firearms became available, and we needed firearms of that nature, and they were cheap. Hey, capitalism at work, right? They were cheaper than anywhere else. And so the department reached out and ordered a group of those firearms. So
that's a worst case scenario if someone's got a rifle in the forest and you're going out there. So like, how does that work? You're walking about with this M16 and go up to the people, or?
Well, what's interesting about being a game warden is, of course, everybody that you encounter potentially is armed because you're dealing with hunters and fishermen all the time. Yeah. So we have a lot more, I'll say, not relaxed, but a lot more lax way we approach people when they're armed. A lot of police departments, when they hear gun, they all, it's everybody draws their gun. Well, in my world, everybody has a gun all the time. So the other guy and us. So it's really not anything to get that excited about. As a matter of fact, when I work with the urban police officers, they're always like, you seem pretty nonchalant about the guy having a gun. I was like, well, don't all of us have guns? I mean, what's the issue here? As long as he doesn't try to use it, there's no need to get excited about it.
Yeah.
And even if he tries to use it, as long as he's not trying to use it against us or another person, I'm not going to get excited about it. So it sounds like, people think that we go out or imagine us going out there with our rifle slung in front, our hand on the trigger, our hand on the handguard, and our finger on the trigger, but it's really not like that. Most of the time it's slung behind our back because we don't want to be confrontational in that manner. There's no need to escalate a situation that doesn't need escalated.
Yeah.
So it's just there should something go bad and potentially go bad from the standpoint of, I'll give you an example. Let's say that there's two guys out hunting and they're disagreeing over something. Now they're both probably armed. And I just want to make sure that if they decide something goes sideways between the two of them, that I can take care of myself. So that's the kind of nature you have for a gun like that. The idea is that if they have shotguns and you have a rifle, you can reach out further, so you can actually disengage and get further away and be at a safer distance. So that's just the advantages and disadvantages of the different platforms. I grew up personally hunting with a shotgun in my hand, so that's my favorite firearm. I love my shotgun. I can do a lot.
In my life, I've shot L98, which is the simpler version of the British SA-80.
Yeah.
Automatic rifle, semi-automatic.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not even semi. It's it's bolt action rifle.
Right.
But you get a nice kick from that as well. So
and that's probably the 12 gauges are known for hitting pretty hard. They put a punishment on your shoulder. Even experienced shooters, after a while, if you're shooting slugs out of it, it tends to wear your shoulder down a little bit. Yeah. So it's it's nothing you want to set off unless you have to, because man, it's punishing.
Yeah.
So and again, in 24 years of doing this work, I've never had to shoot anybody. Never even had to shoot at anybody. So it's not the dangerous world. It's just being prepared. It's like anything else. If you're going for a drive in the country, you probably want to have a jack in the car and a spare tire. Just because in case it happens, you just don't know. Yeah. So
when I was working about in up in I think it was Reading in the forest, I was like, I wish I had a handgun with me, because I heard about these bears here, and that's the only reason I would like to carry a gun around there. I don't have to have. In Vienna or Scotland, there's nothing to eat me, so like, I don't care about having a gun, but I think I would at least have a large knife which I did have when I went camping in Upper New York. So I heard stories about like those black and white animals, which I've forgotten the name of, raccoons. I heard they're quite nasty.
Oh.
So I was sleeping with a big full-tang knife behind my back.
Yeah, in my personal opinion, raccoons are the nastiest creature on planet Earth. We refer to them as trash bandits around here, or trash pandas, but they're disease riddled and they're just disgusting. But so you talk about hiking, so kind of a cute side story. So I go elk hunting in Wyoming, and I'd never been to Wyoming prior to my first trip. And so I went into a Walmart there, and I thought, they told me to make sure you take a sidearm and a rifle because there's bears everywhere out there, big grizzly bears. And I believe them, but I'm from Indiana. I don't have bears routinely in Indiana. So when I walked into the Walmart to get ready for the trip and we got out there, we're in Cody, Wyoming, and I felt a little underdressed because everybody had a shoulder rig and a big old pistol on their body, but I was the only one without an industrial-sized can of bear spray. So I thought, what am I getting myself into that I'm not ready for? So again, they don't have issues out there with firearms or anything. It's just when you go hiking or you go up in the mountains, because they have bears and moose and all kinds of stuff that's top of the food chain, you have to be prepared, and you need that stuff to make sure that you come back in one piece. So when we go out west, we take a gun everywhere we go. You don't go walking into the mountains without a gun because you just don't know what you're going to encounter.
Yeah. I wonder how much percentage safety that gives you, because I can imagine that a lot of attacks would occur from like behind or like when you're sleeping.
Yeah. Well, I'm told a lot of attacks in Wyoming especially happen at Yellowstone because tourists don't understand bears. And so they do things that provoke the bears and they get themselves in trouble. But a lot more people actually get hurt by moose there than by bears, because moose are just nasty, ornery critters, and they're really large, and they're not really worried about you, the human. You're kind of puny to them. So people will agitate them, try to get up close to them and stick cameras in their faces. That and the bison. The bison are really bad too. They're not friendly. But again, you're talking 1,300 pound animals that really don't regard us very, very highly. They're just, okay, so you're 200 pounds, big deal. That's how they kind of look at it.
Yeah, why would the bears seem less interested in us than these other animals?
I think because a lot of tourists get out and they try to get up close to the bison and the moose, and so they're sticking cameras right in their face, and of course you don't know if they have young around or whatever, and probably just eventually they get annoyed and they just decide they've had enough. And to them, a love tap to tell you get away from an animal that big and that powerful could do a lot of damage to us. It's kind of like getting a love tap from a Volkswagen. It's going to hurt. It may not kill you, but you're going to remember it. So
yeah, animals, even British cows, a mother with a calf is very dangerous. These animals are just so much larger. Even a pony is big compared to a human. We are really frail. Unless you're built like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like it's going to be the mass effect of impact against the human body, and we are pretty pathetically built. I mean,
right? Yeah, exactly.
Frail,
that's why I carry my large bore rifle. It's more sturdily built than I am.
So, like what kind of problems would you fix in a rifle? I guess it's something jamming and some gunpowder stuck there, or what other things can go wrong? Right.
So a lot of times you'll have issues with like double feeding of the rounds on a semi-automatic because it's a magazine-fed operating system. You'll have people that don't hold steady, strong into the gun, and it will cause a double feed because it allows too much slack between the gun as the operating system is trying to push the old round out and cycle a new round. It needs a certain amount of resistance to do that. So you'll see issues like that. Bad primers, bad extractors where it can't extract the old round because it breaks the extractor. Gas tube issues where the pressure is just not coming back correctly. Just all kinds of anything. As we always say, it's a mechanical device that can and will fail. So you just got to be ready for whatever might go wrong with it.
What's the gas tube for? Is that to reload the next round or something?
Right. So the gas tube goes in the model rifle we're speaking about. It goes out near the front of the barrel, and it goes up through that little window on top, and it through the hand guards, and it actually takes pressure from the round leaving the barrel, the overpressure, and it pushes it back through that tube, which then throws the bolt backwards in the gun, which allows for extraction and then picking up a new round and feeding it into the chamber.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty high pressure, but if those become misaligned or they become clogged over time, then they'll fail to feed.
That's not something that a soldier could do in the field. Fix that kind of problem, would they?
No, it's a fixable problem, but not something that you're going to do out on a battlefield. No.
Yeah.
No. Gas tubes are very fragile, not super fragile, but they're pretty fragile. You couldn't carry around in your pack because if you bend it, it's completely useless to you. So,
right.
Yeah, in that case, you would probably just grab another rifle from somebody.
Yeah.
If you need it more than your friend, you just take it from him, right?
What happens if the round's in the barrel for whatever reason, and then you load another round, and you shoot it? What happens?
I've not witnessed it in person, but I've seen the aftermath of that. You get a what they call a barrel obstruction, and it make the gun explode. I've seen guys lose their hands, parts of their face, because you're talking about a double load in that chamber that's only designed for a single load, so that extra pressure has to go somewhere. And while guns are very well built, extremely well built, there's just only so much that they're designed to take. And
that doesn't make me want to get into shooting very much, to be honest.
Usually, if you're experienced, though, you're gonna know something's wrong. Typically, if there's an obstruction in the barrel, you're going to get an indication of some kind. You're going to know something didn't happen right. A lot of people that get barrel obstructions isn't from a round that didn't go down the barrel. It's they've done something silly and stuck their gun barrel down in the mud or the dirt or whatever, and it gets up in the barrel and it obstructs it at the end, which is just as dangerous, just as deadly. But that's the most common thing that we see is barrel obstructions from mud and dirt, and it causes some catastrophic situations.
Because I guess when the gun's in full auto mode, there's not going to be any time to check that. If something goes wrong, it happens pretty quick, but it's probably unlikely that that's going to happen if it's firing normally. Right.
Well, and in full auto mode, it's probably not going to. You're not going to get that because, again, in the firearm we're discussing, that bullet has to go all the way down almost all the way down the barrel to create the overpressure to cycle another round into the chamber. So if it never makes it down the barrel, it's not going to have enough firepower to recycle that bolt. So you're not going to get that effect. Now, if you're silly and you think, why did it quit shooting in the middle? I still have rounds in the gun, and you pull that extractor handle and ram another round in there because you're just going to, then you could potentially put yourself in a dangerous situation. But when we teach these firearms, we teach over and over and over again, if it malfunctions, it's for a reason. It's a mechanical device. So stop and figure out what's going on before you move forward. And knock on wood, we have not had any issues with that in all the years that we've had them. But we've instructed the guys ad nauseum, we instruct them on how to do these things.
So are you also responsible for purchasing these guns?
No, those were actually purchased before I came on. That's why I say that's how old our guns are.
Right.
But they work really well, and it's like having a nice old automobile. If it works good, I that was bad English, but if it works well, keep using it. It doesn't, we are not going to wear these firearms out. These are designed for high volume use, and we don't use them we fire a lot of rounds to them, but we don't use them to the volume that they were designed to take before they break.
Yeah.
So. And I have a lot in my personal collection. I have a lot of guns that are older than I am that still function like the day they were made. They're phenomenal. I actually prefer older guns, they work perfectly as long as you keep them maintained, just like a vehicle.
Yeah, nice. So you also did covert surveillance camera operator.
Yes.
So what kind of department's that for police? Does that?
Well, we were using a lot of times for illegal drug growing operations. We would find drug grows, and of course we don't want to just tear it up. We want to find out who's doing it to keep it from happening in the future. So one of my jobs, and I was apparently very good at it, according to the instructors and the people that made the camera, I did an extremely good job of it. So I would go out and hide these cameras in logs, in trees, in buildings, anywhere you would want to, and then we would remotely. They would have infrared or other types of seismic triggers or whatever to turn on, and then we could leave them for weeks at a time, and then when it was clear, when we were safe, we'd go in and retrieve the camera and then review our footage and find out who they were, or what they were doing, or what times they were showing up, so we could pattern them. So, but yeah, I would hide a camera probably within 3 feet of a person. They would never have a clue that it was there. So you also get to see some really disgusting personal habits when you get up that close to people.
So that you could so these weren't like 3G enabled devices where you could just remotely get the data.
Right. Yeah, this was the old days. The new ones are, and it's fantastic. And you can actually, the new ones, you can bounce the signal off cell towers, so you can even be further away and get real-time updates. But that has its advantages and disadvantages as well. Because if you know a guy is where you're trying to watch him, but you're not there, then you get all excited and try to get there. It can be dangerous to get there that quickly, or you might rush and not be ready to confront the guy that is in your patch or in your area. So there's a lot of things, in the old days, when the way we did it, again, we would pattern these folks and get to know them, find out who they were, ask around town, get all the information on them, what they drove, and such and so forth. So we did a lot more what I would call background work back in the old days. So we really knew our targets really, really well, and I think that in a lot of ways made us safer because we really knew what we were up against.
Has anyone ever tried to make like a man trap, like shoot this big net that just covers the guy and then you go over and pick him up?
No, nothing that exciting. Just a lot of times, if we knew like they were always coming back on a Thursday at 7 p.m., then we would just be there at 6:45 p.m. and then just jump out and say hi, make their acquaintance. So, but at least in my experience, for the most part, the drug growers were pretty professional in nature. They weren't really aggressive types.
Yeah.
They were in it for the money, so it wasn't really when you've got 5 or 6 state police officers standing around you in your grow, they pretty much know the game is up.
Yeah, it's like poker. You've basically gambled and you've lost your lot.
Right. And what's interesting is a lot of times, they were very good at what they did, and I would say, "Hey, you want me to get your picture with your stuff before I take it?" And oh yeah, so they would pose, because it was a pride thing, and I totally understood it. So, but yeah, they knew they were caught. They were kind of being professional about it. So
how many years would they typically go down for? 10 years, something?
All depends. All depends on if they have prior arrests, if they're known. We had several that were on probation, either federally or state probation or parole, so they immediately went back and finished their term. Some were just sadly people that were trying to help a buddy out or needed a little bit of money, so they were going and checking because the guy figured that somebody was going to get arrested in his plot. So they were just, for lack of a better term, unwitting accomplices. So just down their luck, and they needed cash. So the guy said, "Hey, I'll give you $40. Go out and check my grow." And of course, $40 when you need cash, it can be a good amount. So it's things like that. So it all depended on the situation, but a few were real hardcore. I remember one guy, he had outdoor grows and indoor grows, and we ended up taking down both. And I remember walking into his indoor grow. It was rather extensive, large, and amazing, to be honest with you. And he had stuff he called God Bud. And I asked him why he named it God Bud. And he said, "Well, try it and you'll find out." And so I don't think so. But, that stuff was so potent, we had to double rubber glove just to keep the stuff out of our skin.
So are you talking about cannabis here or what?
Cannabis, yeah, really high-end cannabis, super high-end cannabis. But then with cannabis, you always ended up with other drugs, methamphetamine, cocaine. Sadly, and we've discussed back and forth, I think maybe you and I have, but a lot of times when you would take these guys down, you would find child pornography. They were willing to deal in anything that they could make money off of. So it wasn't, when people say, "Oh, you're just the poor potheads." It wasn't poor potheads. It was, organized criminals that were doing anything they could to make money: guns, drugs, child pornography, whatever it took. So.
Yeah, sick, man.
Yeah, it was so bad that when we would fill our warrants, our search warrants, it was so common to find that stuff that we would actually have written into our warrants. And on our tech team, our takedown team, we actually had a computer forensic guy that would go with us on every call, so he could mirror and clone all the hard drives because we knew what we were going to find.
Yeah.
So it was astounding. I'll just say it that way.
I guess
It was
once you're in
astounding.
that lifestyle and mindset, then you realize like you're never going to fit in back to society. So hey, why not just do everything and make the most
Right.
of this money as I can? Because I'll never get a job
Right.
again, and I'm not, like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and people all the time, even now, are like, well, why was the game warden doing that? And it's like, well, it's just where the case is led. You talk to a guy and he talks to a guy, and it's just how the world evolves. But luckily, where I live in our state, they give the game wardens or the conservation officers that full police power latitude so we can handle any situation we come across.
mm-hmm.
So, that's what we're expected to do. We're expected to be professionals that do it no matter what. So.
So what's next for you right now? I think you're currently something liaison officer or something like that.
Yeah, so that's my fusion center liaison officer. So I go out and I try to make sure that police officers have the the intelligence information they need, as well as our critical infrastructure private partners. So like Army Corps of Engineers, a lot of defense industry in Indiana. So I try to keep them as up to date on what's going on with the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and all those guys that are constantly trying to break into their computer systems. We have Purdue University here, which is where I attended, but Purdue is a really high-end engineering school, and they do a lot of work for the government. And so they're always trying to get into Purdue's computers. They have their own team that work on that, but the idea is that if we all pool our intel, then maybe we won't miss that one thing that might have we could have prevented. So a lot of times it's duplicate information, but at least we all have the same information, so we're looking at the same threats, so we could try and mitigate those before something bad happens or they steal something that they want. The Chinese are big on military stuff, trying to get the military secrets.
It must be hard for American companies that do business in China and have investments there. Like, that's when there's so much pressure back at home to like see, well, why are you working with China, or why do you have business there?
Yeah, luckily I don't work in private industry. I don't have to make that. I have personal businesses, but they're very small. I don't have those businesses that I need that labor market, and I need that the cheap materials and things. So yeah, it would be very difficult. I understand where industry's coming from when they're trying to make a buck. And again, just like with our when we bought our rifles, it was obviously from a U.S. company, but it was who had the best deal. This is what we're looking for. Here's the money we have. Who can make us the best deal? And I don't think until recently the vast majority of industry or folks in the United States or Europe realized how advanced the Chinese efforts are. How hard they're working to get all that information. I certainly never did, and I've been in law enforcement for 24 years, and I had no idea that they were. I knew they supplied like Walmart here and things like that. And if you wanted cheap flip-flops, that was a great way to go. But I had no idea that they're, the kinds of things they're trying to get into to undermine our innovations, essentially. So
America might never get it to the top again. It might have been Chinese are hungry. The Americans want to sit back, watch Netflix. I don't know if you guys can pull it back.
Well, the good news is that we get this will sound terrible, but we get a lot of their high-end young students come over here to go to MIT and Purdue and all the big engineering schools. So a lot of them stay. So we that's the beauty of America. So illegal immigration, none of us are for, but if you're the best of the best and you got something to offer, come on in. I'm the son of an immigrant. My mother was born and raised in Denmark, so there was better opportunity here for her family after the Second World War, so they came here.
So if I wanted to become an American citizen, how quickly could I do it, and how much money would I need?
A lot. I can tell you that for my mother to be naturalized in the late '60s and early '70s was $60,000 back then for my father. That's in '60s and '70s dollars, and a lot of money, and a lot of heartache and a lot of hard work. She is ardent American. She's full on about legal immigration, has nothing good to say about illegal immigration. She had to do it the hard way, and she did it the right way, and she is a proud American. Uh, but like she tells everybody, it was not easy, and it shouldn't be easy. So
I'd love an excuse to go to America quite consistently. Um, if my startups do well, then I probably will, but we'll see how it goes.
yeah, it's America's a beautiful, or the United States is, and Canada. I used to go to Canada quite a lot, and before everything devolved, I went to Mexico quite a bit. Mexico is absolutely beautiful. I love Mexico. Can't go there right now because I really don't need my kids to get kidnapped. But the geographic differences in the United States and the different types of people you run into, not because I'm from here, but it's from one end of the country to the other. It's a completely different country.
Yeah.
It looks different. It feels different. It sounds different. So yeah, I've lived here for almost 50 years and I haven't seen half of it yet. It's just so big.
I find Americans really interesting to talk to about. I think about half my guests, at least half my guests on this show, maybe even 67% are Americans, and most of my listeners are in America.
Yeah.
I don't know what. It's just the way it's developed right now. So, in the future, I hope to spend a lot more time in America. Put it that way.
I think I don't know because I've not spent a lot of time other than in Canada and Mexico. I've not spent a lot of time outside of the U.S., but I do think there's something of a improper view of how Americans are or what we're like. And I used to hear that when I grew up right down the road from a really liberal college that drew students from all over the world. And they would always say when we would meet them, we always thought you all were a bunch of cowboys and loud and brash and just arrogant and ill-tempered. And to a person, they would always say, but that's not how you really are here. It's just what we see. And I think, again, that goes back part of it with Hollywood. Not bashing Hollywood. Make your money. Do what you got to do, unless you're in with the Epstein crew and all that.
Yeah.
But that's not true America. We're just like anybody else. We like to sit on our back porches and talk to our neighbors and drink iced tea and maybe good bourbon if it's available. But yeah, we're like anyone else. We just want our kids to grow up and do well and have a nice quiet life. That's really America at the heart of it all.
I actually know a bunch of cowboys for real. I actually went and rode in some of their horses down in Tulsa.
Oh yeah,
I went to a church. It was actually a barn, right? And you went to church service. You had the seats on the ground, and then you had the place where the guys and the horses came up, and they sat on the horses while the service was going on. But I tell you what, that music, I've never heard such good instrumentalists in a church service as I did in that. Well, maybe Gypsy Hungry is exception, but these guys, and they weren't even the main band; they were like the second team. The music was so good on those guys.
Yeah,
so talented.
My parents and my sister, one of my sisters, are big into horses. I mean, my sister drives out to South Dakota to buy her horses from Indiana. So, yeah, I've spent a lot of time around those. But yeah, they're just, we always call it cowboy sense, just good old common sense. Don't, it's the golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated, and just Americans are very, as a whole, except with you see on the news right now, but Americans as a whole, and I think you've probably learned this from speaking with all your guests, but we're pretty easygoing. We let everybody do what they want to do until you cross a certain line, and at that point, all bets are off. You don't want to cross that line with Americans, but overall, we're live and let live kind of people. You do you, we'll do us, and just don't infringe on my rights, and then we're all good. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think in America, if you're really successful, it's sort of easier than say other countries.
I don't know that yet, but I'm trying to get there. I'll let you know when I figure that out.
I think there's less like envy and jealousy. I think if you do well, people are happy for you over there. That's from what I've heard.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. For the most part, yes. I mean, it's because we don't have a lot of old money here. We're not an old country. We don't have, at best, we're 250 odd years old as an established country, 400 years old essentially from the Jamestown and the Pilgrim period. So there's not a lot of old money here. So most of the people that are successful here are self-made, and that's always been something that as Americans we look up to. You know, if no matter where the beauty of America, no matter where you come from, I'm an example myself. No matter where you come from, you can do better. You just got to work at it really hard. You know, there's no shortcuts.
What's really
But
hard for you? Is it 70 hours a week or 60 hours a week or what? 80 hours a week?
80,
You
you
work
know,
80?
I don't right now.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. I do in different ways, but you know, for a while, my wife's got her business. I had a small business, and then I worked 40 hours a week for the state. You know, doing what we're talking about. And then I was a coach for fitness and several other things. So yeah, I was probably putting in a good 60, 70 hours a week between my
Nice.
various. And then when you're on like my church, I'm not anymore, but on my church board and my local community service center board and all of that, yeah, you rack up a lot of hours. Then you
Yeah.
throw the kids in there with their after school activities because the United States is big on, sports, of course. So we have our AAU. My youngest daughter, all my daughters play, but my youngest daughter is a really good volleyball player. So we would travel every weekend to all parts of the country for her to play. So you cram all your work in, and then every parent at all these tournaments are all have their laptops out, and when their kid's not playing, they're doing work. That's yeah. I'm told that Americans work way too much. I don't know. It's all
Yeah.
we've ever known. My
I,
mom and dad are workaholics.
I'm always
So
always take my laptop with me. In London, I'm working on the underground. I'm going to work and then I'm working on my own stuff on the laptop
yeah,
or the client stuff on the way there. Like, um,
it's unusual, I think, for average Americans to take more than 2 or 3 weeks of vacation a year, and usually not all together at one time. A lot of us take it 1 week at a time because
cool.
you got to work. I mean, it's just how and here it's like obviously not the same as we see on TV, but it's kind of a social disease if you're not a worker here. If you're lazy, it's not and by lazy I don't mean like you don't do anything, but a lot of folks I know have 2 and 3 jobs because that's just what we do. It's just how we're built.
Okay, so as you
So
can see from the beard, we took about 3 or 4 days because we were busy, and now we're back recording again. So we're going to look more now on the future, and I also had a little conversation with David about some of the interesting things that his ideas, and if he can share some of that. I'm not sure how much you can share, but maybe you can let us give us a taster.
sounds good. Yeah, so as I said, in the future, I'm just about another year, and I'm looking to change careers. Doesn't mean it has to happen in a year, but I'd like to get at least one more year to make sure that everything's solidified. Had a few people looking, talking to me, but as I said, or I say all the time, I don't know if I've said it here before, but I haven't quite figured out at my age what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm still keeping my options open. Um, which seems to be a common theme with a lot of people I know. My father says the same thing, and he's going to be 73, and he says he still doesn't know what he wants to be when he grows up. So, um, on the side, however, I've been working on. I have one patent already, and I'm working on another idea. I actually have 3 or 4 ideas, but my wife makes sure that I finish one before I pick up another one, trying to keep me focused. So I've got a couple ideas I'm working on in the garage. It's just right now they're all related to the fitness industry, and right now with the fitness industry making all the personal protection equipment instead of what their main products are, they're a little bit behind, and they're really not taking on new products at this time. So hopefully in the near future things will go back to normal, and we can start talking to them more about some of these ideas and seeing if we can mass produce them and get them out to the public. So that's what I'm doing on the side right now.
Hmm. Can you share what your patent is in the moment you have?
Yeah, so it's you know how when you go into the gym and you got all these big weight plates laying around, and they're either on a tree or they're just laying loose. What this is it's if you've seen there's vertical tree stands, so the weights go straight up and down. Well, the problem with that is if they're heavy, like they're 45-pound plates or 55-pound plates, it's really hard for smaller athletes and some of the ladies and injured athletes to move those weight plates around. So what the idea behind my first patent is that it's actually like a spring-assisted system, but it at the top of the weight tree, it moves the next plate to the very top, so it's right about center of gravity or slightly higher than human center of gravity, and it's easier to move the plate on and off of the weight stack. And as you load it just pushes it down just enough to make it easy to get the next weight on, and vice versa when you're taking them off. as you pull them off, they're always at the same level, always at the same angle, so you don't have to like put your back in a strange position. Or as I said, for injured or smaller athletes, they don't have to strain so hard. Trying to pick up 45 or 55-pound plate up from the floor and slide it up a vertical 2-inch column 40 inches into the air can be even for a bigger guy, can sometimes be a difficult thing to do. Not to mention the chances of pinching fingers or other body parts. It's just not a good concept. So I was watching my wife and some other female athletes struggle in the gym one day to unload some weight because they're pretty strong. And they were deadlifting really heavy and they needed a lot of weight, and they were really struggling to get the bottom of that stack to get those weights into their hands. So I thought, well, it seems so simple, so silly, really. Wouldn't it be nice if those weights just automatically push themselves to the top of the stack or let themselves down automatically? So that was where the idea developed from. And again, I'm always told the best ideas are the simplest ones, and it seems super simple to me, but it seems to get a lot of people excited when they see it. They like the idea. So,
is this something that you can retrofit to existing machines, or does it have to be designed with the machine?
No, that's the beautiful part. No, I purposely designed it to be retrofitted to any existing weight stack that's already in existence. The only thing would be with the way the spring system is set up, it could be slightly specific to certain manufacturers because of the patents on the length of the vertical stack, as well as some of the plate compounds that they make, especially for the bumper plates or the rubber plates. They're little bit different sizes. So in order to assure that that it works exactly right, they would need to modify the spring composition slightly to accommodate their weight loads. Even if, however, though they just choose to go with the standard spring that I had manufactured, you're still only talking about a difference of an inch or two for each plate. So it still moves the weight plate up to a usable position and still greatly reduces the chances of pinching fingers or other body parts or clothing as you're loading and unloading the weights. So it still works. It's just it can be fine-tuned to specific manufacturers' needs.
So I'm familiar with like the squat rack where you have the 4 metal pins that come out and you have the different weights. Mm-hmm. And your system can work on top of that. I mean, I guess it's hard to think about it and think of a picture.
Right. So it's instead of the horizontal weight racks, where I live, we have a lot of what we call vertical plate stacks. So there's just a vertical post that goes straight up in the air, and then you put the weights over top of that center pole, which we use Olympic size weights, so 2-inch opening. But a lot of people just put them on there and drop them. Well, 2 things happen. You can get toes caught in there, fingers caught in there. It's really hard on the casters, the wheel casters on the bottom. It bends those. It bends the entire system. So it's just basically an X on the bottom with a vertical pole sticking up that you just stack your plates on. And this just provides a way to make the plates always stay at the top of the weight stand so they're easier to load and unload. Also, what's interesting about it is because of the way it's made up, one of our concerns is going to be that it would be top heavy and might tip over, but actually the center of gravity on it is only 17 inches at its max, the height of the center of gravity. So it's actually extremely stable no matter how much weight you put on it or don't have on it.
I'm not trying to imagine how that's possible. Like the more weight you put on, you think the further it will go down, but you have some kind of system in there that makes the spring have a higher tension if there's less weight, if there's more weight on there.
Right. So, yeah. So it pushes that spring as a variable in it. So it pushes the weights. So if there's only one plate on the entire system, then you're only having 45 pounds at the top. So it doesn't make it really unstable given the width of the base. So, but if you have 2 plates and you've got 90 pounds, and I'm sorry for those of you in Europe that use it in kilos, I'm not that good. I can do the quick math in my head, but I'm not that good. But as you load it, obviously, the more weight that's on it, then the center of gravity is going to come down because the center of gravity of the plate stacks are going to lower as it comes down as a whole, as a unit.
Yeah.
So it's self-correcting. Amazingly, it's self-correcting on its center of gravity. So it's always moving its center of gravity lower the more weight you put on it, so it keeps it more stable.
Yeah. That's amazing.
That's physics.
It's amazing that you managed to patent that because you think that a spring inside of a metal tube would be hard to patent.
Yeah, well, it's actually the spring. So what's interesting is the spring is 8 or 9 inches of so it sits outside of the of the. We tried to put it inside the tube, but it was too unstable. It flexed too much and caused too much issue with the existing shaft. So what actually happens is at the top and bottom, there's either an aluminum plate or a steel plate that has grooves cut in it that hold the spring in the proper position. And one of the concerns was the amount of deflection that we were going to have in the spring as it got loaded. But as it turns out, the way I designed it, and then my engineer was able to add a little bit to it, the spring actually has almost zero deflection, so it actually goes perfectly straight up and down, and it works like a dream. So again,
it's like a U-shaped thing where you have the spring getting pushed up from some kind of force transfer from the bottom.
No, it's just a standard compression spring. It's just the way it's ground and the way that it's laid into these. So the plates are an inch thick, and we grind a collar into them. It's a half an inch thick. It allows that, and then we weld them in place so that that spring can't move. But because of the way it's based and the length of it and the way I had the spring turned, it allows it to compress and decompress without moving side to side or shifting. Mm-hmm. It's kind of strange. I had to learn a lot about springs. I thought springs were just these little things that somebody built up and then you threw in. But there's an amazing amount of engineering that goes into spring manufacturing. The material they make it out of, how they twist it, the rate of twist, the number of I can't think of the word right now, but the number of little spaces that you have, it's just really amazing. So I had to learn a lot, which I'm not a spring engineer at all, but I had to learn a lot about how springs work and what you can and can't do with them. So, but it worked out. It actually turned out quite well. So
yeah, I've never seen a vertical loading dispenser for weights. That just seems so weird idea. Why not just have it? All the ones in the UK, they have an angle like this, and you have it's like a tree with branches coming out, and you can get immediate access to the weight that you want.
Well, what's nice though is for weightlifting competitions and things, when you need to be able to wheel out weights, you can just put them on the casters and just push out your rack of weights, and they're literally sitting right there for you. It'd also be handy for auto racing for the tires in the pits and things. The other idea that's been brought up to use it for is, and I don't know how you guys in Europe do it, but over here in our supermarkets, we have great big platforms of water softener salt and dog food and pet food and things. The same concept works if you take a pallet and set it up on that on a flat surface. As it loads down with all the weight, as individuals pull their salt or their pet food off of the pallets, it would keep bringing those pallets up so that the older folks don't have to bend over and crane their neck to be able to get their load onto their cart. So the concept is varied. It's just right now we focused it starting on the weightlifting aspect of it. Like I said, I don't know how necessarily in Europe how the weights are located, but a lot of gyms here have, as I said, vertical weight stacks, so they can get a lot of weights in a very small area. They can just push them over against the wall. And then what's nice is, a lot of people don't lift massive amounts of weight, so there's enough weight that the tree and the way I've got it designed will hold, depending on who your manufacturer is, but 8 to 9 weight plates at a time. So that's up to 400 pounds or 190 kilos at a time to even deadlift. So a lot of people, that's more than they need. So just one weight tree, they can wheel it around with them and do all the extras that they need to do, finish loading it safely, and push it back in the corner. Makes it kind of nice. You have to walk across the gym with it. You can push it around. I know we're all weightlifters, but we're kind of lazy. I mean, if it's easier, then it's nice. You can just take your weights with you. So.
Mm-hmm. You would have been probably a pro bodybuilder if your significant other wasn't complaining about steroids and stuff like that,
Yeah, if she'd have let me, if she would have agreed to, she would. I mean, I was I competed in Indiana quite a bit. Did pretty well in my division. I would usually get first place. So yeah, I was really into the bodybuilding. The thing that she didn't like about it was the diet and the grouchiness at the end. So I would do a 6-month starvation cycle essentially, but lose weight across about 6 months, and by the end I was pretty hard to be around. Even for myself, I couldn't stand to be around myself. But yeah, had she been on board, I probably would have jumped on the needle and tried to do something interesting. I did have a friend that did that. We actually competed together, and he ended up going pro and was quite successful. Yeah, quite the specimen to look at. I can just say that. If you look him up sometime, it's Eddie Nunn. They called him Big Country, but it's Ed Nunn Bodybuilder, Nunn.
Ed Nunn.
Yeah, Ed Nunn, and he was quite the he is quite the specimen still, but he was something. He'll have the craziest legs you'll ever see.
Yeah, I don't know how people can go like 6 months without eating a chocolate biscuit or a pizza.
Well, what's funny is even now, though, I have my days when I go off the rails, but doctors basically told me I could take medication to control my blood pressure. I could learn to eat better. So I've been eating well for 20 years now, and I really don't have those cravings like I used to. I don't have those issues like I used to. The saying is I eat to live, not live to eat. And so, I still enjoy good food, but eating to me is just something that's part of my day. So I still eat 5 times a day, drink lots of water, couple cups of coffee in the morning, water, and that's all that I get. Maybe an occasional beer every now and then, but not too often. And yeah, just it's just something you get used to. It's like anything else. Some people are picky eaters because they don't like the taste of anything. I'm just a picky eater because I like the taste of everything. So I just like what I get. So
yeah, cool, man. That's impressive. That's yeah. I know very few people have managed to get a patent in life. That's expensive. Yeah. I heard it's like £50,000 or something to get a patent in the UK, and that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always tell people the most interesting about bodybuilding, I think, that came out of it for me, was how pleasant and wonderful everybody was backstage. Even though you're getting ready to compete against these people, the common misery of starvation and working out 4 hours a day and getting ready for this thing creates a camaraderie. And I've had guys, and I've done it as well, but guys backstage saying, hey, if you turn a little bit this way and flex out just this way, it's going to look that much better. And people will say, well, but isn't that hurting them? And it's not what it's about at the end of the journey. That's what you realize the day you step on stage. Is, at least for me, it was about the journey, not about where I got with it. If I was going to win, I wanted to win against those guys that were at the top of their game. I didn't want anybody to say there was a chance that I didn't earn it outright. So yeah, it's backstage is a pretty neat place because you would think it would be an egotistical disaster, but it's actually just the opposite. It's a very laid back, very friendly place. So
okay, so I guess one topic we can cover is as a police officer, how do you feel about this whole crazy time in America right now with all the stuff that's going on?
Well, I don't like it. I think with part of it is social media, Twitter and those kind of things, they seem like reality to people, but I don't think, and the polls don't bear out that necessarily Twitter is reality. So I think the vast majority of Americans support their police officers. They're good police officers. It's like any profession. We're not 100%. Only been one perfect person that ever lived, and we put him on a cross. So we're humans. So where I live, there's all kinds of road signs or signs in people's yards that say support your police, we're pro police, this and that. So it's where I live in the Midwest. We're very much part of our communities. I live in a very small town. Everyone knows me. They know my children. My children go to school, in the same school. My oldest and my youngest have all gone completely through school here. So everybody knows us pretty intimately, as far as when we're not working, we're at each other's houses. Not police officers, just community members. We coach baseball and football and soccer, and so. But as far as the madness goes, it's very demoralizing, especially to big city police departments and police officers. But I try to tell people, I don't. This isn't braggadocious in any way, but I've had the displeasure of having to arrest other police officers for bad behavior, and it's not fun. But there's certain things that can't be tolerated, and there's certain people that should not be in law enforcement. And as a field training officer back years ago, there were young men that I trained that I said, you're a fantastic human being, but you're just not cut out for this job. It's not for you. You don't have the correct, in my opinion, mental makeup and or personality. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that this isn't the job for you. And I think personally, part of it right now is we're so short-staffed for police officers that we're kind of forced sometimes to take people that we wouldn't maybe ordinarily take, especially in large departments where you have a lot of bodies that you need, and I guess they hope that the people work out. So some of that is a little bit substandard. As I said, I think we've talked before about it, but Hollywood's done a huge disservice to police work, especially in the United States of America, because everybody thinks that what you see on the movie screens and on the TV shows is real life, and it's absolutely 180 degrees different from that. So yeah, we've got problems, but outside of a few really large centers like Seattle and Portland and New York and Atlanta, I think the majority of the country is still moving along pretty well as normal, and it's really not. I think there's a lot more discussions going on between the public and the police, but I think the way we police and the job that we do is still the same, and I think we still do a fantastic job of it overall. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So what is it about the movies that is not realistic compared to real life?
Well, the movies, you're in a shootout every 5 minutes, and there's never any paperwork, and your captain says, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't have killed that guy, but don't do it again, and just go on back on the job." And I tell people, I've been on this job for 24 years, a little over 24 years, and I've never had to use my firearm against a bad guy.
Yeah.
It just isn't the reality of it. And if it is, as you probably see in the news now more than ever, if you are involved in a situation like that, you're immediately put on administrative leave, paid or unpaid, depending on your department, and you're going to go through 6 months or more of reviews and all kinds of stuff, psychological evaluations and everything else before you're ever allowed to put that gun back on your side and go out in public with the badge on. You're going to be riding a desk. So it's the other part about the movies is that and TV is that they think that we solve everything in a matter of minutes. I think part of the problem with the Hollywood culture is that on TV, police work has instant gratification. In less than a half an hour to 1 hour, you're going to know who the bad guy was, you're going to know all the facts of the case, and everything will be determined. And in real life, as we see with, let's say, the George Floyd incident, it's still ongoing. There's still more information coming out. And people, we're human. So if you don't give us all the information, we're going to fill in the spots that we don't have with what we logically deduce is likely. Now, some of that logical deduction is based on what we've seen in Hollywood. So we get some errors in our judgment moving forward. The biggest thing about that I think people need to understand is there's a system of due process, and we need to wait for all the facts to come out before we start forming opinions. We can be outraged and we can think that it's wrong and so forth, but doesn't necessarily mean that we have all the information. So we need to keep an open mind until we have all that information, until we determine what our final response is going to be, not form hate groups, or I guess I shouldn't say hate groups, but protest groups that, as in the Michael Brown situation in St. Louis, was based entirely on a lie. Hands up, don't shoot. Never happened. But it made it out there. That's what people assumed was the truth. And so, Black Lives Matter is born of a lie, essentially. So
I know people are worried about, is this police officer going to get due process, or is America going to sacrifice this one guy so that the riots don't get worse, in a sense? Are we going to forego? I mean, as much as people can watch a video and have an opinion that it was murder, I tweeted that it was murder, but then again, he's still going to have to go through due process. And the fact that if maybe the prosecutors and the system will be too afraid of the potential consequences of him getting a lesser verdict than a lot of people want. So, but then again, if they do give him non-due process, that opens up a bad precedent. So hard to be in law enforcement and legal right now prosecuting this case. Right.
Well, it all comes back to leadership. Leaders have to lead, and I think one of the big things I see is, for me personally, is a lack of somebody being the adult in the room and saying, "Whoa, stop! I know it's not popular to say, but we need to do, and this is what we have to do, and these are the steps." And we know you're not going to like that. Most people aren't going to like that. Heck, the guy saying it may not even like it, but it's just how it has to be. My parents didn't spank me because they hated me. They spanked me because they loved me. right? So, and having had kids, it breaks your heart to do that. But again, somebody has to be the adult. We can't let the children run the show. And I think that's my opinion. That's where we're at right now. Is we have a lot of knee-jerk reactions and a lot of emotion, which is all fine. We're built that way, but we need to apply the logic gene a little bit and allow ourselves to take a step back and make rational inferences and decisions based on the facts, not on how we feel about it. We may not like how we feel about it after we make those decisions. We may come to the conclusion that, yeah, this is horrible, but this is the truth. We don't like the truth, but that's still the truth, and we have to live with that. And that's the impetus then from that point to move forward and do something of value with those results. If we don't like the results, then we need to figure out how to make the results better. Not just scream and rant and rave, and then, as Americans do a lot of times, in a month forget all about it and then wait for the next thing to pop up. So that's my opinion.
I mean, these topics have been discussed to death all over the media and news and all the podcasts, but the future is unpredictable, and we all saw how quickly the world can change over just some virus, but then you've got this butterfly effect of this one event in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to apply logic and create sound principles and rules, because you don't know what the future is going to be, but we need a good basis when we get there to have an idea. Like, let's use hurricane response in the United States. Years and years ago it was hurricane, everybody panicked. Now, if you look I'll give massive shout outs to the Florida Department of Natural Resources in the state of Florida. Those folks know how to run a post-hurricane situation. They got it down to a science. They don't like hurricanes. They don't like that they exist, and they certainly don't like the destruction. But they know there's going to be a system and a process that has to be followed in order to get the least amount of damage and the least amount of downrange effect from that hurricane. And that's what those kind of principles need to be applied across a lot more than just hurricanes. And again, nobody likes hurricanes. We don't like the death and destruction. But we know bad things are going to happen, and we have to be able to have a system in place to deal with those bad things in a proper manner. That's my opinion. But
have you worked in a post-hurricane zone?
Yes, in 2005 I was fortunate/unfortunate enough to go and work at Hurricane Katrina in the state of Mississippi, and again learned a lot of stuff, a lot of things that I never thought about, didn't know about. And I think we did a really good job, but we would do it differently in the future. A lot of things didn't run as smoothly as they could have. It's again a learning process, and it comes down to professionals doing their jobs and allowing the professionals to do their jobs so that they can get the maximum effect. I personally don't mind people putting in their opinion, but unless they know what they're talking about, and unless they have done the job and they know what it's going to require to get the job done, then their opinions are somewhat less weighty than someone that has, let's use the hurricane situation. I've been to one major hurricane, and I know a little bit, but I'm going to defer to the guy from Florida that's been to 30 of them. He's going to know a lot more, and he's probably not going to listen a whole lot to the person that's lived in Arizona their whole life and never even seen a hurricane. So, and that makes sense. That's logical to think. Now, that doesn't mean that the person in Arizona doesn't have good input or good ideas, but they need to be vetted a little bit before they're shot into the mainstream.
So, what would you have done differently with Katrina?
With Katrina, I think in the wave that I went in, so it happened in waves. We went down in groups because you get burned out pretty quick. But in the wave I was in, we initially spent too much time trying to do quote unquote police work. And what we really ended up doing the most of was outreach and going out. For us, we had a lot of boats and things because we're the DNR. So we would go up into the river systems and the bayous and interact with the locals who had lost everything. So we ended up taking things like medical treatment, diapers of all things, kids supplies, food, just anything that they needed. I mean, it became a daily thing where we check on them for their safety and welfare, but then we'd also make sure that we brought what they needed in water. They're up in that river system, and the water's all contaminated. They can't even touch the water because of impetigo and all kinds of things that are floating around in the water. So we would take a boatload of water and diapers, food if we could, depending on what they were tired of eating, because at some point you get tired of eating those army rations. So we try to find them new and better foods to eat. So just little things, just the perspective of how you go into it. I went into it personally thinking that we were going to, go out and patrol every night and arrest bad guys for looting and such and so forth. And there really wasn't as much of that as you would think. It was more, again, the humanitarian effort. So we very quickly switched gears and started, I shouldn't probably say this, but raiding the FEMA tents to get what we needed so our folks up in the communities in the river systems could have what they needed.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit.
What's it with FEMA and all? What's it with FEMA and all those conspiracy theories that are out there?
I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think there's enough bad in the world that you don't need to add any to it. But I think people see things and they hear things, and then logic dictates that they're going to fill in the holes that they don't have. And I think sometimes it takes them down a bit of a rabbit hole that probably may not exist. I mean, I'm not going to say that some of them aren't right, but I don't fall into the two things I don't really believe in are conspiracy theories and coincidence.
Yeah.
I think everything's got a plan behind it. We just don't always know what the plan is.
So what's the point of having these FEMA camps? Is it for like the aftermath of a nuclear war or plague or what exactly?
I have no idea. They don't tell me those things, but I think the idea is that if you have a situation where, let's say California, and you have a major earthquake, you have a place where the supplies are going to go, a designated location. If we knew where disasters were going to happen, we could get ahead of them. That'd be great. I think that's part of the idea behind some of these locations, is to have stockpiles ready, at least close to geographically where things might occur. California, we know they're going to have earthquakes. That's just not in question. So you prepare for earthquakes. Down in the southeast, you're going to have hurricanes, so you prepare for things you're going to need for hurricanes. I don't think they're camps so much as they're just supply locations. It like terrible way to say this, but an Amazon hub for natural disasters.
I remember one video I was stuck in my mind. They had something like 20,000 containers, and they looked like these containers where you'd put in like a body or something like that. And the guy's making a film. I mean, that's a frustrating thing for me, is that we don't have all the information. We don't have people being transparent about what all these things are. That's why all these conspiracy series start.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not high enough with the food chain. They don't tell me all those things, so I don't know. But again, it's, if you think about so when we had the pandemic here, and for the state of Indiana, trying to get ahead of and flatten the curve, trying to get ahead of the supply chain, when everybody else is trying to do the same thing, just obtaining like masks became until the private companies started coming online and making PPE, but just trying to get those supplies from the standard suppliers, they were gone like almost overnight. I don't know about where you're at, but where we're at, we're still having trouble getting like sanitizing wipes, and in some places hand sanitizer, certain cleaning products, because they just completely got wiped out. The big funny story, not funny, but interesting story in the United States was one of the first things we ran out of overnight was toilet paper. Who'd ever thought we'd run out of toilet paper, especially in the U.S. You go into a supermarket and there's literally an entire aisle, hundreds of feet long, of nothing but paper products like toilet paper and paper towels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea, I think, behind some of the FEMA issues is that they've studied and know that whatever's in those containers, whatever they need, they realize that stuff's going to run out very quickly. When you have populations of millions and millions and millions of people, it doesn't take very long to go through 20,000 containers worth of anything. If it's bottles of water, it's going to go quick. We would take in Hurricane Katrina, we would load up a pickup truck in the bed pretty much full of water and ice and drive around, and it'd all be gone by the end of a day.
These weren't containers as in full. They were like flower pots, but they were stacked together. They were like basically plastic molds, so they were like embedded within each other, It's like stacked like
Mm-hmm.
a pile of flower pots. So they
Right.
were empty and they were green.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I say, but I do know at Katrina, when at our camp, we actually stayed in the U.S. Forestry camp, but our camp was supplied some of the equipment and some of the supplies came from FEMA, and there were times even just I say even just in Hurricane Katrina, it was a massive destruction area and a massive um, natural disaster. But there were times when the supply chain would get short, and we were dealing with. Interesting enough for you, basically the damage area we were told was the size of about the island of Great Britain, which is a large area, but
Yeah.
not a great big area when you speak about the size of the entire United States of America and the population of the entire United States of America. And we were still, that was the only natural disaster going on at the time. We were still running out of supplies. We still couldn't get supplies.
Well, if that happened in the UK, we would collapse. I mean, I doubt we'd be able to help an area the size of London, to be honest. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, hopefully you can call us and we can put some stuff on a ship and come over because we've done a damage area that big before. But simple things like getting gasoline was we'd have to send groups of armed, a tanker truck. Not we, I wasn't in charge of it, but there would be details where people would take tanker trucks and have armed guys on the truck as well as armed vehicles front and rear just to go up to as far north as Jackson, Mississippi to get gasoline to bring it back down so we could run generators and things. It was crazy. You in the United States of America in 2005, you wouldn't think that would even be necessary. And so what I say is with some of the FEMA places is that was a large disaster area, but if you multiply that out very much further, you're going to have really really bad supply chain issues. And I think that's what those are there for is, and I don't know what those supplies are used for, but it's the idea that if something really big happens, that we can actually respond and not only run out at the disaster zone, but also the rest of the country not go into a deficit like we're seeing currently with cleaning supplies just because of something like a natural disaster. That's my opinion, but again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I don't know.
Actually, it makes more sense now. I guess I haven't thought about this FEMA stuff for a while, and when I was a bit younger, I was really into all this conspiracy stuff, and it was depressing actually.
Yeah.
If you start looking at the sky and think they're poisoning you every time there's a plane going by and all this stuff,
No, again, I'm not. I guess I'm just old, maybe a little jaded, but I think there's just enough bad already that I don't think anybody's looking to add to it. But so, my opinion. So.
Cool, man. Well, anything else you want to share for our audience before we finish part one?
Love your police officers and your firefighters and your healthcare people. I mean, believe it or not, the vast majority of them go into the job only ever meaning to help. And they might seem old and tired and crusty sometimes. They might seem a little aggravated, but it's just because they deal day in and day out with the same things over and over. It becomes like a factory job in a way. And most of the time you're dealing with the same group of folks over and over and over again. I say many times in my when I used to train, I was like, it's really a sad thing because most of our hard-paying taxpayers and citizens really never need the police or the fire department unless they get pulled over for speeding or they become a victim of, either a crime or a fire or something. So the people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, for the large majority, don't have legitimate jobs and they don't pay taxes, so they actually get the bulk of the attention, but they don't contribute. So it's kind of a strange system. And again, like anything else, we've all seen bus drivers, at the end of the day, and people without correct change and such and so forth. And by the end of the day, that bus driver is pretty tired. And I think that happens a lot in law enforcement and the medical and the fire service. It's not intentional. It's just that they're dealing with it with things all the time, or we're dealing with things, I should say, because I do that job too. It doesn't make it right necessarily, but a little grace sometimes goes a long way, and it goes both ways. I tell a lot of people, I don't think I've ever written anybody a ticket or a violation. They've earned it. Attitude goes a long way. When I walk up to a car and the person in the car is really, hey, I'm sorry, I'm late for work. I got this going on. I got sick kids at home. We're all human. We get that. When the first thing happens when they walk up to the window is somebody starts screaming about this right or that right or whatever, it tends to not go well. So, at least in the United States, people often forget that driving is not a right; it's a privilege. So, the fact that because that's how most interactions happen are traffic stops. So, be gracious. The only reason we're out there doing traffic is because if we don't, then it becomes the Wild West. Everybody does what they want to do, and eventually people are going to get hurt really bad. So the idea behind enforcement is to keep worse things from happening. I told a reporter one time, he asked me why I was working on our 4th of July holiday, and I said, well, I'm going to get called out if I don't work because something bad is going to happen if we don't try to, keep people reasonably within bounds. So I just as soon write a few tickets and make a couple people a little bit angry than to have a major accident and have to tell a family that something bad has really happened. So it's a trade-off. So kind of, I would tell people kind of view it through that lens. And doesn't mean you're going to like it. I can certainly understand not liking it, but try to, again, like anything, put yourself in someone else's shoes and figure out why that officer's doing what he's doing that day. So that's kind of the parting message I would say about that, at least that aspect of work.
Okay. Well, David, it sounds like you're doing a lot of fascinating stuff, and looking forward to seeing what the next year holds for you.
I'm excited too, actually. I'm ready. I'm a young man still, old man's body, but I'm a young man. So I want to see what else I can get myself into.
Yeah, we'll appreciate you coming on the show and your time.
Anytime, sir.
Okay, see you next time. Thanks
my
sir. Audience and my listener for joining Linfields Cafe. That was David Dungan, and police officer entrepreneur. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.